Lisa's going to speak first. Since 2014, she's been Executive Vice President of Client Services and or operations with CustomerCount. That's an online enterprise customer feedback solution that really is the gold standard in the industry. So look them up, CustomerCount. Her job is to oversee client management services, delivery, product development, etc. She's really running the place. So she'll cover the benefits and importance of engaging your owners in communication. So Lisa?
Thanks so much, Sharon. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to team up with Resort Trades and Sean Coogan at the Wealth Resort Group today during this webinar. You know, the topic, owner communications, has always been a very important topic and a focus for all of us on this webinar today. However, it seems that it has certainly taken center stage here recently with the very unique and unusual experiences that we're having right now in our environment. I look forward to sharing information today, as Sharon mentioned, with Sean on customer engagement, communication tools that we can use with our owners, and a drill down into one key and very important, I think very effective communication tool we can all apply, and that is owner and customer feedback surveys. So let's get started by moving to the next slide, please. I want to first of all talk about customer engagement because it's basically at the core. It's why we do owner and customer communications. I like to think of customer engagement as a highway or a journey that we take that leads us to building owner and customer loyalty. And as we all know, when we build loyalty, we have a significant positive impact to our bottom line. Our owners pay their maintenance fees if we're in the timeshare resort world. Our renters return. And in general, our customers will talk with others very positively about us and help grow and build our business. Effective engagement happens when we, first of all, create real connections with our customers. We certainly don't want to be in position, and certainly today, to be a rather ambiguous or a faceless entity that our customers view as only reaching out to them when and if we need something or we're asking something of them. Rather, it's important for all of us to at all times engage positively and proactively with our owners and customers in valued and meaningful ways to them. Likewise, we need to make sure we're in a position to be able to respond effectively and efficiently when they have requests or questions of us. We want to do everything we can to build that emotional, meaningful connection, because when we do, we heighten the level of engagement that our customers and owners have with us, which, you're going to hear this repeatedly, builds loyalty. And loyalty, obviously, is the end game here. The second thing that we do, as we build that emotional connection and we increase the level of engagement that someone has with us, we transform them into what are true believers. They believe in what we do, they believe in how we do it, and they believe in who we are. So they get that much more engaged and are that much more loyal to our company, our product, and our service. As we seek to increase customer engagement, we want to take a look at all the possible touch points along that journey with the customer that we can reach out and communicate positively with them. We're going to talk more about these touch points later in the presentation, but did want to bring it up as really a key thing that we want to keep in mind as we try to build that customer and owner engagement. When our owners feel engaged because of our efforts to reach out and because we are so efficient and effective in responding to their needs and their requests, we're going to be able to enhance that overall customer experience, that overall journey that they take with us. And back again to the key point of this, we build that loyalty. So let's take a look at the next slide. Customer engagement. Wanted to delve down just a little bit further on it so that we all kind of have the same baseline understanding of what it is, because again, that's what our communication tools are designed to do, is to build that engagement, which in turn builds loyalty. We hear a lot of customer blank terms, customer engagement, customer experience, customer service. There's a lot of customer terms running around the block. So let's take a look at customer engagement as a concept and as an entity versus, say, customer service or a customer experience transaction so that we get a ground-based understanding of what the difference is between the two. Customer engagement is holistic. Customer service or customer experience transaction is really honed in on that one interaction, that one specific touch point that we're having with a customer or an owner in our case. With customer engagement, as we mentioned on the previous slide, we're seeking to enhance every stop along the journey. We're proactively communicating. We're proactively reaching out with valued and meaningful messaging and information for our owner and our customer. We're measuring results in customer engagement. When we think of customer engagement, we're not looking so much at the process, we're looking at the result of all of our efforts, combined efforts to try to engage. So we're measuring that versus a process, which we're typically doing in a customer transaction, customer experience, or customer service type environment. Customer engagement and the focus on customer engagement needs to be and should be enterprise-wide. It involves literally everybody. From marketing to sales to our front desk staff to our housekeeping staff to our executive level. Everyone has to be focused on and wants to be able to understand how we're going to positively communicate and engage with our owners and our customers. Whereas customer service or customer experience transactions are more department centric. We're measuring, that process of how our owner services agent, as an example, interfaces or interacts and performs in a call with one of our owners. So now that we've got a baseline understanding and kind of a baseline place to start from on customer engagement, why it's so important, and how it varies from customer service or customer experience transactions, let's move to the next slide. On this particular slide, I think we all know inherently, it's just obvious, it's logical. If you engage your owners and your customers in really positive value ways, if you build that engagement level, it's going to pay off. Some of these statistics are ones that have been eye-opening for me and a good reminder of why we go through all the efforts we do. A, it's the right thing to do, but B, what are those end results that we get when we are effectively communicating and engaging with our owners and our customers? And we talked about earlier the importance of proactive communication and proactive communication that's meaningful and valued for our owners and our customers. Well, this first bullet point certainly reinforces that. Over 90% of customers are looking for that. They're looking for us to engage proactively with them. Over 80% of companies that are focused on and make customer engagement a priority experience revenue growth. So it's a payoff. It is going to impact our bottom line. Problems are always going to exist. We do not live in a perfect world. We know they're going to come, and we just need to be prepared for them, and we need to ensure that our communications are going to meet the task of ensuring resolution. What we find is that 54% of customers who are satisfied with how we handle a problem or a concern are fully engaged. They're still happy. They like us. They have that emotional connection with us. They're going to be loyal. These last two bullet points on this slide were real eye-openers for me when I looked at them and found them in research. Before social networking, we all knew, and there were various studies, and according to Gallup and Forbes, it was typically between 7 and 15 people who have an unsatisfactory experience with us are going to tell, a customer who has an unsatisfactory experience with us is going to tell on average 7 to 15 people. With the advent of social networking, and if you look at the average social networking user, let's say Facebook and Twitter, they can reach 200 people with just one post about an unsatisfactory experience. So while social networking and all the technology that we have available to us today has so many positive benefits, we also have to be aware of the reach that it provides. So when we can engage and build that engagement level with our owners and our customers, we minimize the chances that somebody is going to do that reach and is going to end out blasting out to the free nation, just about that unsatisfactory experience. So things to keep in mind as to why it is important to engage and continue to communicate. So on the next slide, let's talk a little bit about the touch points that we referenced earlier on in the presentation. And this is where we're going to start to talk a little bit too about how we can deploy survey feedback tools as a good mechanism to communicate with our owners and customers, and in turn increase that level of engagement. Here's a few of the what I would consider to be more key touch points that, as resort operators, those of us in the audience that are resort operators, we may want to consider: A, making sure that we're engaging and communicating, and B, maybe the application of some type of feedback mechanism. Obviously, when we come out of the gate, that purchase, when that prospect first comes to us and experiences us as an entity and hopefully becomes an owner, that's a great opportunity for us to showcase our commitment to valued communication and to showcase our commitment to someone that their opinion and their feedback is important. So positively and proactively communicate, and think about using some type of a feedback or a survey tool to measure your performance and the results of that experience during the sales process. As we go on up these staircases a little bit, I want to stop for a minute at the pre-arrival step, if you will. Right now, given these unprecedented times that we find ourselves in, this is an opportunity along the customer's journey with us that we have to communicate in a meaningful way and heighten the engagement level that we have. I know so many of us out in the audience that are in the resort business already do some type of a pre-arrival communication, which affords us the opportunity to tell our owner and tell our guests, hey, we look forward to seeing you. If you got any questions, to call us. We'll see you then. You can think about at this point in time of adding potentially a survey to that. A survey that could ask some questions about what they might need upon their arrival. Are there special considerations, special requests they have? It can be anything from housekeeping services to a concierge assistance with some type of an activity or a reservation. You can also use this opportunity to let them know what protocols you have put in place to help ensure their safety and health during this interesting time we find ourselves in. When you look at the next step, the resort stay, this is kind of the whole enchilada. It's the reason our owners have purchased. They are here with us to enjoy the stay at our properties. So that is definitely a touch point that we want to make sure we're communicating with throughout and engaging, but also we can deploy a survey feedback solution to make sure that we're measuring and asking for feedback. We're engaging proactively with communication. We want to know how we did so we can build upon what we did well, and we want to know how we did as well on the constructive side. So opportunities for us to be better at what we already do. And then you've got your checkout and your owner services, all of which, again, want this slide to get you to thinking about where are those key touch points on your particular customer's journey with you that you can stop and say, hey, I've got some communication opportunities here where I can proactively communicate and engage, and or I have an opportunity here to showcase my commitment to understanding what they want and need and their opinions, and I can deploy a survey. So next slide, please. Let's get more into the meat and do a little bit more of a drill down into surveys themselves and some of the best practices and procedures relative to surveys. First of all, let's talk about the how, if you will, the type of platform or the type of survey, that the mechanism we can use to deploy a survey or a feedback system. There are two basic ones. You can do it online, automated, or you have a written opportunity. I want to talk about the differences between those two. Maximum flexibility or flexibility in general. When I talk of flexibility, I'm talking specifically about things like your ability to display questions in a certain way to specific types of customers or owners or guests. So, for example, if you want to be able to only ask a specific question of a particular type of owner or customer, an online automated platform lends itself very effectively to that, so that you're not displaying a question to folks to whom it may not be applicable. So you don't have that extent of flexibility with a written, because once it's written, it's done. You really can't move it around. With an online system, you also, in terms of flexibility, have the ability to, let's say you've got a scale question where you're asking their satisfaction level on housekeeping inside a unit. And you want to know, you're on a scale of 1 to 5, and you want to know if someone scores you a 2, you want to know more information about why they gave you that 2. With an online system, it can automatically display yet another question asking them for additional feedback and details on that rating. Whereas with a written survey, we're kind of stuck. A written survey obviously doesn't have that same flexibility or functionality to be able to support something like that. When we look at deployment, or how we actually get that survey into our customers or our owners' hands, with an online solution, it's by default just more efficient and more effective. Now, you can still deploy with written. That's not to say it can't be done, but it's just more efficient and more effective with an online version. You can send it out email. You can send it out SMS text. You can set up a specific URL that you can drive people to where they can click and take a survey. With written, we're handing it out or we're mailing it out. It's a much more manual process. And we're hoping that when we hand it out, we've got it to the right person. They're going to do the right thing with it. And then they have to get it back to us as well. They have to somehow get that back to us, hand it back to us, or mail it back to us. Whereas with an online platform, once they finish that survey and they click a button to submit, they're done and it's back to us in real time. When we look at how all this data comes back in, so we get all these responses and now they're back to us. Now we need to do something with it. We need to compile it. We need to analyze it. We need to make sense of it. With an online automated platform, that's all done for us. It will take all of that information and it will make sense of it for us. It will create reporting for us automatically. It will do it in real time. We don't have to sit there and with, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 50 individual survey forms and try to capture them all, load them into an Excel spreadsheet, and try to do the sorting ourselves. So the manual aspect of a written survey is pretty significant. Real-time availability of response data with an online platform. Your customer, your owner clicks submit on that survey button, and boom, it's inside the system. It's compiled, it's analyzed, it's ready for you to look at. With a written survey, again, you've got to kind of wait until it gets mailed back to you, handed back to you, and someone internally has an opportunity to look at it and talk with you about what those results are. So that obviously then enables you to be, when you're online, much more timely in your response to feedback. And we've talked about, again, our opportunities along the customer's journey with us to be able to proactively communicate, ask for feedback, build that engagement opportunity. So that is the bottom line on online versus written. A couple more notes about how things you might want to consider when you're trying to figure out what platform you may want to use for your surveys and feedback mechanisms. I think automatically some people will have an assumption that an online version or an online solution is just more expensive. It's going to be. I would encourage you to consider all aspects of a survey feedback program before you make a decision on which one might be better for you. With a written, obviously there's some manual manipulation and manual involvement that are costs. They may be softer costs, but they're there nonetheless. Also, with your online solutions, you have choices. You have a myriad of different choices. Keep in mind that typically online solutions fall into one of two higher level buckets, a DIY or a do-it-yourself. And then you have other platform solutions that will assume responsibility for things such as consulting on construction of survey content and questions with you, designing both the reporting and the surveys for you, ensuring that those things are deployed for you versus you doing it yourself. So I think once you do your homework, kind of look at all of these different facets of a platform, you'll be able to find out, do some due diligence. You'll be able to find out what's going to be most appropriate, what's going to fit your budget most effectively. So let's talk a little bit more about surveys. Next slide, please. I want to talk about content of surveys. We like to say, let's do our absolute best to avoid so what questions, because those are just killers for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which we can get data that's going to be completely meaningless to us. We could be asking the wrong thing of the wrong people. We run the risk of irritating owners, customers with non-applicable questions, things that are not applicable to them. And we talked about earlier with customer engagement, we want to make sure those communications that we do initiate are valued and applicable and meaningful. So let's take a look at some of the tenets of what we consider to be a good question. Number one, out of the gate, define the objective. This is, you gotta know where you're going before you get in the car. So it's the baseline place that we always want to start. We want to understand before we sit down to draft survey questions, what is it that we need to accomplish? What is it that we need to garner feedback on? We want to look at our key performance indicators. You know, what is important to this organization that we measure? What performance areas are we asking our team members to be held accountable to? Compensation. You know, are there certain aspects of our compensation program that incorporate owner and customer feedback that we want to make sure we have that feedback to be able to reward accordingly? So first and foremost, define your objective before you even start out. Figure out at a high level, what are the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that you want to make sure you find out through deployment of a survey. The second thing we want to talk about is the response that you're going to get actionable. So it's one of those, there's an old adage, if you're afraid of the answer, don't ask the question. In this case, if you can't do anything with the answer, don't ask the question. You know, you want to make sure that you're asking for information that you can do something with on behalf of your customer and your owner or yourself. You want to make sure that it's a definitely important question and something you can act upon. When we think about survey questions too, we want to make sure that we ask about one thing at a time. I think there's a propensity, and we all fall for it, I think it's human nature, in our quest to try to maybe keep the survey at a reasonable length, make sure we're not asking people to spend too much time with it. We may try to ask, sneak 2 or 3 things into one question. So for example, we may say, we may want to ask about satisfaction level with the efficiency of the check-in process, as well as how welcoming and friendly the check-in agent was. As much as we might want to do that, we really don't want to. Several different reasons. Number one, when our owner or our customer provides their feedback, we can't be 100% certain what exactly they were providing the feedback about. So if you've got a satisfaction question on that check-in example that I just provided, you don't know if they were thinking about the efficiency of the check-in process or if they were thinking about how friendly the check-in team member was. So definitely make sure you're asking one thing at a time. Otherwise you're not going to be sure what perspective your customer or owner was thinking about, and therefore you can't really trust the response data that you're getting back. You also want to make sure that you're being specific in what you're asking. Don't leave room for misinterpretation. Be very clear, be very concise, and make sure that when you read this, not knowing what you were thinking when you put it together, would it be clear to you if you didn't have a lot of background on how that question was constructed? An example might be if you have a new policy that you want to ask input about from your owners or your customers, don't ask, what are your thoughts on the new policy? Make sure you specifically state which of the new policies you want their feedback on relative to that question. And then lastly, I think you may have heard the term closed-in questions. That term's thrown around a lot in a feedback or data analysis area. By a closed-in question, what we mean there is typically closed-in is focused on gathering quantitative data. Quantitative data being something that is tightly measured or has a tightly measured response option to it, like a scale question, satisfaction scale, or a multiple choice question or multiple choice response question. So, I can choose A, B, C, or D, or I can rate my satisfaction or my agreement on a scale of 1 to 10. So oftentimes, particularly when you're trying to look for quantifiable data, you want to make sure that your question has a closed-in response option. Now, that does not prohibit you. As a matter of fact, in a lot of instances, I would encourage you to consider then having a follow-up question if you want more specifics on why your owner or customer selected that rating or selected that choice. Then you can move into asking, please tell us more about your rating, or please tell us more about why you selected that particular choice. So then you've got, as you all know, is termed a qualified data or quantified data, where it's more unstructured in nature, qualified data, more unstructured in nature, but it gives you more information and more feedback that makes that rating or that choice that much more meaningful for you. A couple other things before we move to the next slide about survey questions in general. We always get the question when we have the opportunity and privilege of working with a new client, how long should my survey be? That is part art and part science. You want to ensure that your survey is inclusive of everything you need to know about, that you are going to get value from that survey. You want to ensure that your owner and customer are going to feel like, hey, this is really valuable stuff. They've asked me important things. I get it. I understand why they asked the questions. And you also want to make sure that you don't lose them halfway through the survey, because if you get 0, you're going to have 0. One of the things that I can tell you and share with you is that the extent to which people will stay with you on the length of a survey does have a direct correlation to the extent to which they feel a connection with you and their level of engagement with you. So we're back to that whole engagement equation. In the resort timeshare industry, I congratulate those of us who are resort operators and work in and around that industry, because it typically enjoys a very high response rate from your owners, from your customers. We see 25 to 30 to 35% response rates on a post-stay survey, as an example. And Sean, I think, is going to talk more about that relative to Welk when we get to his portion. Likewise, if you have a limited exposure or limited relationship with your target respondent, and I'm thinking specifically about things like marketing surveys to a group of people for whom you're almost an unknown to, you can expect to see a lower response rate, a much lower response rate typically. So the point to this is, to the extent that you have a relationship, a connection, a tie, the respondent is engaged with you and they feel that connection with you, you can get away with a little bit of a longer survey because they're vested. They want to tell you how they're feeling. They want to provide their feedback. You need to consider if this is a new handshake with someone, and you probably want to get in and get out as quickly as you can. But again, make sure you're getting in and getting out with the information that is most important to you. So keep that balance in mind. Got a little bit more runway if you've got the engagement level, a little less runway if you don't. Next slide, please. Before we wrap this part of our conversation up, we've talked about, we need to communicate, where we can communicate, why we communicate with engagement, some of the basic tenets of surveys, platforms, questions, things we need to consider to ensure a high response rate, things of that nature. We cannot have this conversation without talking about regulatory and compliance considerations. And these really hold true not only with surveys, but they hold true in general with our owner communications. None of these items on here, I'm sure, are a surprise to any of you. This is not the first time you've heard about any of these. I think it merits, if you will, a few moments to just review these real quickly. Before we jump into them, want to share with you what the suggestion that we always share with our clients, and that is, while we have can generally guide on this, you always want to double check with your legal counsel and make sure that you're in compliance and have the proper awareness of where you are relative to each of these things. So let's first of all talk about some regulations that are out there that have to do with promotions or offers that we're doing. And want to stress what's there in parentheses, no exemptions. The TCPA, or Telephone Consumer Protection Act, which came about to be in 1991, I think most of us automatically know and reference with that the do not call federal legislation. But also, the FCC declaratory ruling language is also part of the TCPA, and that's where we need to make sure that we get express written permission from our owners or our customers or our prospects when we want to do a promotion or a special offer with them. Now, we can get that express written permission either on paper or we can get it electronically, but we need to make sure we get it. And basically what we're telling them with that express permission is that you can contact me via phone or SMS you can contact me via phone or SMS for anything, for promotions or offers. The Canada Anti-Spam legislation, or CASL, also is the same type of thing, and it applies to digital communication. So you want to make sure that you're in compliance with it. Privacy gets to individuals' data, what you can do with their data, how you maintain their data, and security around that. There are privacy regulations both in Europe and with California. Other states are following. And then last but not least, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. We want to make sure that we are in compliance with the digital representation of the content of our messaging. So put image tags on there, things of that nature that essentially enable the visually impaired to be able to effectively read and translate, or to effectively understand our communication through text to visual translation software. So Sharon, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Lisa. I was really amazed that 200 people can hear a negative comment these days through social media. So keeping engaged with them is a big deal. And Lisa, thank you